Generalizations about Iran that apply to Ahmadinejad cannot possibly apply to Khatami, cannot possibly apply to the Shah of Iran, and we must always keep that in mind. Generalizations are dangerous. Iran is a dynamic country that has possibilities of internal change. So, this present leadership in Iran, which has, power projection capabilities and proxies in Iraq, in Syria, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and Hamas in Palestine, the latest anomaly of a Sunni Arab group that is working closely with the Shiite Iran, have rendered the present-day Iran into the regional superpower. It is defying the international global superpower, which is the United States, and it wants its own terms. It wants to negotiate. Doesn't want to fight, but it wants to negotiate. All these proxies are chips available for Iran to use. The biggest concern that we have now ourselves about Palestine is the Palestinian decision-making is seriously fragmented now, and it is subject to external powers. Arafat, no matter what his ills were, and I think Phil remembers when we criticized him when he was in top form and in the leadership of his country, he did have the decision-making for Palestine. He kept it till the very end, in his own hands. I do not believe that we have the same position that Abu Mazen or Hamas can claim now. None of them can speak solely and deliver for Palestine. It has been a real problem for Abu Mazen since he took power to consolidate his position. He was defied, still is being defied by Hamas, which has accumulated a lot of power based on the corruption of Fatah, on the mistakes that the West has made, on the mistakes that Israel has made, and on the good decisions, good, sound, solid decisions that it itself, Hamas, has made prior to the elections to get itself empowered. All these have to be analyzed, and the time is too short. Now we have it as a fact. Hamas has a majority in the parliament, and it holds the whole cabinet. We have a power structure in Palestine with two heads and no decisive power. Abu Mazen did try, I know for a fact, to avoid any conflict with these people. He thought that he could come to some kind of an accommodation with Hamas. He went to Gaza all the time. He accepted to look weak. He did look weak. He did look indecisive. What he wanted to do is to avoid a civil war. He did not want to go down as the one who started the civil war in Palestine, because that he understood that would very likely mean the end of Palestine as the dream, the future solution as we know it. I'm extremely sad to tell you that the present situation in Palestine seems like the beginning of a civil war. It is hard to see a scenario where this confrontation is going to be avoided. Whatever agreements that they had between Hamas and Fatah evaporated the minute that those decisions needed to be ratified by forces outside of Palestine. Now, this is not entirely hopeless if, and it is not too late, if the right decisions are made globally in the joint venture that I talk about. Israel must understand that the occupation must end. All occupation must end. It has a national interest at stake here that was never threatened by the Palestinians with their pipes that they call missiles and the suicide bombings. They were not a threat to Israel. They were a threat to the psyche of the Israelis. Now there is a real threat, a strategic threat for Israel from the emerging alliance against it. If it does not make a deal with the Palestinians, it will not make it possible for the emergence of a local regional alliance between so-called moderate Arabs, perhaps Turkey, and the Palestinians Abu Mazen faction and Sinura in Lebanon. If we don't move on Palestine, there will be a confrontation between the superpower and the regional superpower, and Israel will not be safe. Now, this is time for the United States to understand that there is a need to implement what you talk about. If there is no relief for the Palestinian people on the ground in their day-to-day life, removal of checkpoints, releasing prisoners, improving the economy, and putting an end to humiliation as policy, all we do is for naught, and the future will be grim. I do hope that anybody with any influence anywhere understands the need for actual implementation of these things, and quickly, and quickly. If the United States does not make it necessary that the Arabs who will fund today, and Israel's spoken words and actions start today, then we're in for a very hard time. I'll be happy to answer questions. Thank you very much.
Hello. I'm honored to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Phil. I'm honored to be on a panel with good friends and colleagues who I admire. I'm Ori Nir with Americans for Peace Now. I'd like to, for those of you who are not familiar with Americans for Peace Now, just in a sentence, we're a Jewish Zionist organization. We're dedicating to supporting Shalom Achshav, Peace Now, Israel's largest peace movement, and to advancing a more active U.S. role in bringing about Arab-Israeli peace. APN was the first pro-Israel group to endorse the ISG report's recommendations regarding Arab-Israeli peace. Most other Jewish groups took the cue from Jerusalem and either voiced opposition or opposed it in private. More about this a little later. We endorse the regional approach that the report suggests. We have been calling for years for the Bush administration to translate the two-state solution into a diplomatic initiative. We've been calling for the Bush administration to encourage Israeli talks to Syria rather than discouraging Israel from doing so. We think it's all good for Israel, it's good for the region, it's good for the United States of America, for its interests in the Middle East, both within and beyond the circle of Israel and its neighbors. And we do agree with the Commission's assertion that without addressing the Arab-Israeli conflict, America would not be able to achieve its goals in the region. In other words, we do accept, with some reservations, which I'll talk about later, the notion that there is a link, there is some link at least, which an issue that has now become a subject for attacking the report by some of the more conservative pro-Israel circles. And again, more on that later. What I'd like to do now is take off my hat as the APN spokesman and talk to you a bit about my frustrations as an Israeli who's observed U.S.-Israel relations for many years with what has happened since and even before the report was published. So I'd start by making the observation, the announcement, in my opinion. I think that this peace threat from Washington seems to be over now. It seems to be safe for Israelis to return to the warmth and comfort of the bomb shelters. The conservative wing of America's organized Jewish community has again, I think, come to the rescue and succeeded in making sure that the administration will reject the Iraq Study Group's recommendations on Arab-Israeli peace. And I say again because, unfortunately, this has become a pattern now, particularly under the Bush administration. And I want to talk a bit about how that pattern works. So what usually happens is that something or someone suggests that the administration may become active in pushing or brokering Arab-Israeli peace. It sets off the alarm of potential pressure on Israel to do things that it may not want to do. People in America who think that they're doing Israel a favor rush to seek assurances from the administration that it is not considering anything of that sort. Assurances are granted. The alarm is over. The administration, as promised, adheres to its posture of cautious inaction. And the status quo deepens, and the violence spirals, and chances for diplomatic breakthroughs become more and more distant. And it happens over and over again. And to an extent, it is because of this dynamic that we're so stuck. Because of the combination of rejectionism among so many within the pro-Israel community in America, and the way in which the White House perceives the electoral impact of that rejectionism. There are a few versions of this dynamic. There were times when Condoleezza Rice called a reporter for Israel's radio, state-run radio, after an to offer on-the-record comments refuting the suggestion that America will expect Israel to withdraw to the 1967 borders. There were times when Jewish community leaders were invited to the White House for clarifications to make sure, after administration officials made some comments of that sort, that there's not going to be any diplomatic action. There were times, such as happened this week, that the White House initiated a conference call to send a kind of an all-clear message. We won't do anything. It's okay. And there was an incident not so long ago when a senior administration official in a public speech suggested that progress toward Arab-Israeli peace was a sine qua non in order to get moderate Arabs, quote, to cooperate actively with the United States on a lot of other things that we care about. I'm talking, of course, of Philip Zelikow, who was the senior counsel to Condoleezza Rice, and then resigned recently, but he said that when he was still in office. Less than an hour after he made the comments, he dropped that bomb suggesting some kind of a linkage. Reporters were already told that assurances were given by the White House that the comments did not reflect U.S. policy, all clear, no linkage, no risk. And now it happens again, and again in almost lightning speed. In fact, this time it happened preemptively. We're told that Prime Minister Olmert, when he came here to meet with President Bush on November 13th, after Bush was initially briefed, apparently, on the ISG report's recommendations, then at that 45 minutes that Bush and Olmert spent together in the White House, only the two of them, Bush apparently already reassured Olmert nothing was going to happen, the administration was not going to adopt the recommendations. And after the report was published, after Prime Minister Olmert demanded that members of his cabinet not discuss it, after he said that he himself is not going to discuss it because it's domestic American affairs, doesn't touch Israel, after he did address it by saying that there's no linkage whatsoever between the problems in Iraq and the problems that Israelis and Arabs have, after all that, senior administration officials once again reassured Jewish community leaders here in America that there was nothing to worry about. There was no linkage, no American initiative, no threat of proactive U.S. diplomacy. So we can all celebrate the miracle of Hanukkah 2006. The threats of the evil James Antiochus Baker III did not last even 8 minutes, let alone 8 days. But with all seriousness, I want to say, look, there are many things to criticize in the Baker-Hamilton report. I do think that the notion of linkage between resolving the Arab-Israeli conflict and healing Iraq was overstated. And I do think that the reference that the report makes to the right of return is misfortunate in the sense that this is a phrase that is not in the lexicon of American diplomacy. I do think that prescribing in advance a full Israeli withdrawal from the Golan Heights is not a prudent thing to do. And I do think that the report sometimes is poorly worded and sometimes even surprising that a person with lawyerly skills such as James Baker would produce such a document. But saying all that, and with all that